Hello class. Today we're going to look at multiplying mixed numbers. Okay. But before we do that, we have to have a little pre-lesson. We have to answer this question. How do you change a mixed number to an improper fraction? I'm hoping that you learn this and that you remember it because we use a method called the popcorn method. Okay, so the popcorn method is a method we use to change this mixed number, 4 2/3, into an improper fraction where the numerator is bigger than the denominator. And the way we do that is we take the denominator and we multiply it by the whole part. And what that's basically doing is taking these 4 whole pieces and 4 parts and chopping it into each of them, chopping them into thirds. And then we add the 2/3 that we already have, and then we put it back over the size of the piece that we're looking for, which is thirds. So 3 times 4 gives us 12, plus 2 gives us 14, and we put that back over the 3. So we end up with 14 thirds. So let's practice that real quick. So if I give you these two mixed numbers, please change them into improper fractions. Pause the video and answer those 2 questions. Okay, so let's see how you did. Okay, so we're going to take this denominator of 5. We're going to multiply it by the 9. We're going to add the 3 and put it back over the 5. So 5 times 9 is 45. Plus 3 is 48. We're going to write that down. And then we place it back over the 5. So we end up with 48/5. Okay, and this one we're going to do the same thing. 9 times 6 gives us 54. Plus 7 gives us 61. Write that number down and put it back over the 9. And the reason why they call it the popcorn method is because when you do the little cutesy little arrows, it looks like a kernel of popped corn. Okay. So let's see if we can actually get into the lesson today. We will need this skill by the end of the lesson. So let's start off simple. The first question is 1/2 times 1/2. Well, what does this problem mean? Well, when I see this problem, it asks me a question. This equal sign says, what is, and then the rest of this says 1/2 of, the multiply sign means of, 1/2. So the question that this problem asks me is, what is 1/2 of 1/2? So if we look at this in terms of a picture, okay, I need to model 1/2. So here is a rectangle, and if we were to model 1/2, that means I want 1/2 of it, like that right there. But this says, what is 1/2 of 1/2? So that means I need to take this 1/2 and cut it in half. And what I want to know is, how much is that worth? Well, if we do the same thing to the other side, okay, and we look at this right here, that is actually 1 piece out of the 4. So 1/2 of 1/2 is actually 1/4. Interesting. Okay, well, let's look at another one. Well, this question, it says, what is 1/2 of 1/4? So let's do the same thing. Let's draw a rectangle. But this time what I need to know is, what is 1/2 of 1/4? So I need to know, what does 1/4 look like? So I chop this into 1/4. Okay, and I need 1/4, which is this one right here. Okay, and this says, what is half of that? So I cut it in half again. So what is that one piece right there? Well, that's equivalent, if we do the same thing to all the rest of them, that's equivalent to 1/8. Okay, so 1/2 of 1/2 was 1/4. 1/2 of 1/4 is 1/8. So what does it appear we're doing in the math problem? Okay. Well, I'm hoping what you see is that in order to get 1/4 out of this, all I really did was 1 times 1 to get 1, 2 times 2 to get 4. Or this one is 1 times 1 to get 1, 2 times 4 to get 8. So does that work every single time? Well, let's do one more and see. So what about this one? So what's the question this one's asking? This one's going to ask, what is 1/2 of 2/3? That's the question that this one is asking. Okay, so let's do the same thing. Let's draw our picture. Okay, so this says I need 2/3. So I'm going to chop it into thirds. I'm going to color in 2 of them. Okay, so there's 2/3. So now I need to know, what is half of that? What's half of this? Well, half of 2/3 is that piece right there, which hopefully you know based on the whole thing is just 1/3. It's just 1/3. Now, if we go back and look at what we just did here, you know, we just said that this appears to be 1 times 1 is 1, 2 times 2 is 4. And this one is 1 times 1 is 1, 2 times 4 is 8. What will this one be? 1 times 2 is 2, 2 times 3 is 6. But that's not 1/3. But if you simplify 2/6, it does simplify down to 1/3. Okay, so what really happens in order to multiply fractions, all you really have to do is top times top, bottom times bottom, and then simplify. And that's what we're doing to multiply fractions. So what I have is I've got a little wrap for you to learn to help you remember what it is you need to do. And here is our wrap. It says, I'll just read it correctly right now. It says, to multiply fractions, you know you got them. It's top times top and bottom times bottom. But in order to help you remember this, we've got to jazz it up a little bit and actually kind of wrap it. So here's how the wrap really goes. To multiply fractions, you know you got them. It's top times top and bottom times bottom. Now, why do we learn such things? Well, this top line right here, to multiply fractions, it's what we call a conditional statement. The only thing we can multiply together is fractions. So what if I give you this kind of a problem? 3 3/4 times 2 3/5. Well, the little wrap that we just learned said to multiply fractions. It didn't say to multiply mixed numbers. No, it doesn't. Okay, so some of you may think, oh, this is easy, Mr. Nash. You just do 3 times 3, 4 times 5, 3 times 2. Well, you can't do that. Our wrap says you can only multiply fractions. But earlier in the video, we learned about a method to turn a mixed number into a fraction called the popcorn method. So what we're going to do with this problem is we're going to change each of these mixed numbers into an improper fraction. And then we can actually multiply them. So we'll take this 4 times 3 and get 12. Plus 3 gives us 15. Write that down and put it back over the 4. Times, and do the same thing to the other one. 5 times 2 is 10. Plus 3 gives us 13. Write that down and put it back over 5. Equals. And now we just multiply. To multiply fractions, I know I got them. So it's top times top and bottom times bottom. Well, I know the bottom is going to be 20. Now the 15 and 13, well, I may need to come over to the side and actually do the math on that one. And that's perfectly fine. So 3 times 5 is 15. 3 times 1 is 3, plus 1 is 4. Add a 0. 1 times 5, 1 times 1. We end up with 5, 9, 1. 195. Now, I'll be real honest. Whenever I'm multiplying these, I personally would never get 195 over 20. Because I know something that you don't know. Okay? Right now, what you know is I can do top times top, bottom times bottom, simplify, and we simplify this problem. How many times does 20 go into 195? Well, you may have to come over to the side and do some math as well. Okay? And 195, let's see, 20 goes into 195. Oh, I think it goes 9 times. You get 180, you subtract, you get 15. So this ends up being 9, and 15 over 20 is my answer. But I'm not done yet, because the 15 and 20 can simplify some more. We can divide each of those by 5. And you end up with 9. 15 divided by 5 gives us 3. 20 divided by 5 gives us 4. Now, what I see is that you can simplify your answer, and that's perfectly fine. But you can also simplify your problem. If you have a number on top and a number on bottom that have common factors, numbers that go into it, you can simplify them. So if I see here I got this 15 and this 5, they have a 5 in common. So I could divide them both by 5. divided by 5, this turns to a 1. Divide this by 5, this turns to a 3. So now when I multiply across, I end up with 3 times 13, which is 39, and 4 times 1, which is 4. Now I don't know about you, but you could get 195 over 20 or 39 over 4. I prefer to use the 39 over 4. It's a little smaller. So 4 goes into 39. 9 times is you get 36. All right, 9 times 4 is 36. You subtract 36 out of the 39, and you get 3 over 4. Either way, you end up with the same final answer. Okay, so let's try another one. So here's another one. Okay, so let's write this one down. Okay, and let's begin working on it. So our rule says to multiply fractions. Do I have a fraction? No, this one's a mixed number, so I need to fix it. 5 times 5 is 25. Plus 2 is 27 over 5. Times. Now the 4/9, is it a fraction? Yes, it is. So we leave it as 4 over 9. Now, to multiply fractions, I know I got them. So all I have to do is top times top and bottom times bottom. So we could multiply that straight across and get 108 over 45. Or I can look in my problem and see, do I have any top numbers that share common factors with a bottom number? And I do, the 27 and the 9. They have a 9 in common. So I can divide 27 by 9, and this turns into a 3. And I can divide this 9 by 9, and it turns into a 1. So now when I multiply across, 3 times 4 is 12. 5 times 1 is 5. And now we simplify that. How many times does 5 go into 12? It goes 2 times. How many is left over? When I do 5 times 2 is 10. So I take 10 out of that 12. What do I have left? I have 2/5 left. Now if you simplify this one, okay, you end up with 45 going into 108. It goes in there 2 times. And 45 times 2 is 90. So when I subtract 90 out of that 108, I end up with 18 over 45. And if you divide the 18 and the 45 by 9, which is what we did over here, you end up with the same 2/5. Okay? So now, what if I gave you one of those? We got 2 more problems to go. What if I gave you this problem? 7 5/9 times 3. Well, 7 5/9, that's not a improper fraction, or it's not a fraction, so we got to change it. So 9 times 7 is 63, plus 5 gives us 68 over 9 times. Now what about that whole number? How do I change it into a fraction? Well, there's a real easy way. You just stick a 1 underneath it. So we have 3 over 1. Okay, so now we can multiply across, or we can simplify first and then multiply. So we can either simplify at the beginning or simplify at the end. Sometimes we have to do both. So I see that this 3 and this 9, they have a 3 in common. So I'm going to divide this 3 by 3 and this 9 by 3. So this one turns to a 1. This one turns to a 3. And we end up with 68 times 1, which is 68. 3 times 1 is 3. And now we simplify. Because it's still an improper fraction, so I still have to divide. And this one, you may have to go to the side and actually do your division. That's perfectly fine. 3 goes into 6 2 times. Multiply, subtract, bring down your 8. 3 goes into 8 2 times. 3 times 2 is 6. Subtract, we get 2. Now, because we are working with fractions, we stop at that point. And we say 68 over 3 simplifies to 22. And the 2 goes as the numerator. And the 3 goes as the denominator. And I'm done. One more problem. Okay, so far today we've looked at what if you have 2 mixed numbers. Okay? What if you have a mixed number and a fraction? What if you have a mixed number and a whole number? And we've learned what to do. Okay? Now, last one, what if we have a mixed number that's negative and another just regular fraction. Well, if you remember your integer rules, if I have one negative in my multiplication problem, what is my answer? My answer is negative. Now we just do the problem as is. So 4 times 6 is 24, 25, 26, 27 over 4 times. This one's already a fraction, so you leave it alone. So we asked, do I have anything that I can simplify? Yes, I have a 9 and a 27. So this turns to a 3, this turns to a 1, and now we multiply because there's not anything else. 3 times 5 is 15, 4 times 1 is 4. Then we simplify again. How many 4s in 15? 3, because 4 times 3 is 12. 15 take away 12 gives us 3 over 4. So my answer then would be negative 3 3/4. So again, this all comes back to our little rap that we learned. To multiply fractions is a conditional statement. You must have fractions in order to multiply them. So to multiply fractions, you know you got them. It's top times top, bottom times bottom, and then simplify. Until next time.